They laughed when Alara stepped into the frozen river. A pregnant white wolf was drowning beneath the broken ice. The hunters stood safely on the shore. They called Alara useless. They called her cursed. They said no one would risk their life for a dying beast. But Alara tied a rope around her waist and walked into the black water. Her hands split open on the ice. Her body began to freeze. Still she reached for the wolf. Then the wolf opened its silver eyes, and a strange mark burned across Alara's wrist. By sunrise the village was surrounded by black armored wolves. Because the animal she saved was not an ordinary wolf. She was the pregnant queen of the Alpha King. And the king did not come to thank Alara. He came to take her to his throne. The river was already swallowing the wolf when Alara saw it. Blackwater River cut through the valley like a dark blade beneath the storm. Ice drifted across the rushing water. Snow struck the frozen ground in hard waves. The wind screamed through the dead trees and shook the roofs of the small village beside the river. Everyone had gathered near the broken bridge. The hunters stood closest to the edge. Their heavy boots pressed into the snow. Their hands rested on spears. Their faces showed no fear because they were safe on the shore. They watched the river with cold eyes. Beneath the broken ice, a white wolf fought for its life. Its body vanished beneath the black water. Then it rose again. Its claws scraped against the ice. Its head lifted above the surface for one short breath. Its eyes searched the riverbank. Those eyes were not wild. They were terrified. Alara stood at the back of the crowd with her thin cloak wrapped around her shoulders. Snow had settled in her dark hair. Her old boots were soaked through. Her hands were red from the cold. Nobody stood beside her. Nobody ever did. The villagers had always kept their distance from Alara. They called her the River Girl. They said she had been born during a storm that drowned half the valley. They said bad things followed her. They said crops failed when she walked past the fields. They said animals went silent when she entered the forest. Alara had learned to live with their fear. She had learned to keep her head down. She had learned not to ask for help. But when she saw the wolf beneath the ice, she forgot every lesson the village had forced into her. The creature was carrying life. Its stomach was heavy. Its body was weak. And every time the river pulled it under the ice, the wolf twisted to protect what was inside. Alara stepped forward. One of the hunters turned toward her. His face tightened when he saw who had moved. "You should stay back." Alara did not stop. The hunter looked toward the wolf and then back at her. "That beast will tear you apart if the river does not kill you first." Alara stared at the wolf. The wolf stared back. For a moment the storm became quiet. The wind faded. The river faded. Everything faded except the silver eyes beneath the ice. Alara saw pain in them.
She saw fear.
She saw the same loneliness she had carried for years. Then the wolf disappeared again. The hunters did not move. A few villagers laughed under their breath. They had come to watch a dangerous creature die. They did not care that it was pregnant. They did not care that it was alive. Alara looked around at the faces beside her. Not one person was reaching for a rope. Not one person was stepping toward the water. She felt something break inside her. It was not fear. Fear had lived inside her for too long. This was something colder. Something stronger. She walked toward the edge of the river. The hunter grabbed her arm. His fingers tightened around her sleeve. "You want to die for an animal?" Alara pulled free. "It is not asking for death." Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the storm. "It is asking for help." The hunter laughed. The sound was sharp and ugly. "You are the one who needs help." The villagers watched Alara kneel beside an old fishing rope buried beneath snow. Her fingers shook as she pulled it free. The rope was rough and frozen. It cut into her palms before she even tied it around her waist. No one offered to hold the other end. No one offered to stand with her. Alara wrapped the rope around a dead tree near the riverbank. She pulled it tight until her arms burned. Then she stepped onto the ice. The first crack sounded beneath her boots. A long dark line spread across the frozen surface. The villagers gasped. Alara did not turn back. She took another step. The wind pushed against her. Snow blinded her. The river moved below her feet, like something hungry. Then the ice broke. Alara fell into the water. The cold hit her like a wall. It stole her breath. It crushed her chest. For one terrifying moment, she could not see anything. Black water closed around her face. Ice struck her shoulder. The rope pulled against her waist. Her hands reached through darkness. Then she saw white fur. The wolf was trapped beneath a sheet of ice. One of its hind legs was caught between two sharp pieces. Blood moved through the water in thin red lines. Elara grabbed the ice. Her fingers slipped. She hit it again. Pain burst through her hands. The skin split. Blood rose into the river. The wolf snapped at her arm. Its teeth stopped close to her skin. Elara did not pull away. She reached toward its trapped leg. The wolf growled through the water. Its eyes were wide with fear. Elara pressed her hand against the wolf's side. The creature was shaking. Its body was exhausted. Then Elara felt movement beneath its fur. A small, weak movement. The unborn pup was alive. Elara closed her eyes. She pushed harder against the ice. Her hands bled. Her arms shook. The river pulled at her body. The rope around her waist tightened. Above the water, the villagers watched her disappear beneath the broken surface. Some believed she would never rise again. Some wanted her to fail. Some turned away because they could not bear to watch. But Elara did not let go. She forced her fingers beneath the ice. She pushed until her bones screamed. The frozen sheet shifted. The wolf's leg came free. The river tried to take them both. Elara wrapped one arm around the wolf's neck and reached for the rope with the other. Her body rose through the black water. Her head broke the surface. She dragged in one breath, then another. The wolf was heavy. Too heavy. Its body pulled her back down. The riverbank seemed far away. The hunters stood above her like shadows. Elara heard voices through the storm. She heard laughter. She heard someone say that the river girl had finally found the place where she belonged. The words struck deeper than the cold. For years she had endured their whispers. For years she had accepted their cruelty because she had nowhere else to go. But now she was holding a dying creature that trusted her more than any person in that village ever had. Elara pulled again. The rope burned against her waist. Her hand slipped. The wolf's body sank. Elara screamed into the storm. Not from fear. From refusal. She would not let the river win. She would not let the villagers decide who deserved to live. She kicked against the current. She dragged the wolf upward. The rope held. The tree held. And inch by inch, she pulled the white wolf toward the shore. The hunters finally moved when Elara's body struck the ice near the bank. Not to save her. To pull the wolf away from her. They grabbed the animal by its legs and dragged it across the snow. Elara crawled after them with frozen hands. Her body shook violently. Her lips had turned blue. The wolf lay still. Its chest barely moved. Elara crawled beside it. The hunters stood over her. One of them lifted his spear. The beast is dying. Elara looked up. Her eyes were full of rage. It is alive. The hunter raised the spear higher. It is dangerous. Elara moved over the wolf's body. Her torn cloak covered the queen's side. If you want to kill it, then you will have to kill me first. The hunter froze. The village fell silent. Snow drifted through the space between them. Elara pressed both hands against the wolf's stomach. Warmth moved beneath her palms. A faint heartbeat. Then the silver mark appeared. It began as a small line across her wrist. A thin light beneath her skin. Then it spread. Silver fire moved over her hand. The wolf's body jerked. Its eyes opened. The hunters stepped back. The villagers stared. The river behind them went quiet. The wind stopped. The snow hung in the air. For one impossible moment, the whole valley stood still. The white wolf lifted its head. Its silver eyes locked onto Elara. Then it lowered its head against her wounded hands. The mark on Elara's wrist burned brighter. No one spoke. No one breathed. The hunters had seen wolves before. They had killed wolves before. But they had never seen a wolf bow its head to a girl they believed was cursed. Then a horn sounded across the valley. One long, deep call. The sound rolled through the mountains. The villagers turned toward the northern road. Dark shapes moved through the storm. Riders. Dozens of them. They came down the mountain path on massive black wolves. Their armor was dark steel. Their cloaks snapped in the wind. Their eyes were hard and empty. The village hunters lowered their spears. The villagers stepped back. Everyone knew who those riders served. The royal wolves of the northern throne. At their center rode a man dressed in black. He did not rush. He did not need to. The storm seemed to move around him. His wolf was larger than the others. Its fur was black as midnight. Its eyes burned gold through the snow. The man stepped down from its back. His boots touched the frozen ground. Every hunter lowered his head. Every villager bowed. Alara remained beside the white wolf. She did not know who he was, but she felt his power before she saw his face clearly. His eyes were cold. His jaw was tight. His crown was black iron. Alpha King Kale walked toward the wolf lying in the snow. His face showed nothing, but his hands were clenched beneath his cloak. He knelt beside the white wolf. The creature lifted its head weakly. Its silver eyes softened. Kale touched its fur with a hand that trembled once before becoming still. The villagers watched the Alpha King in silence. Then Kale looked at Alara. His gaze moved over her torn clothes, her bleeding hands, the silver mark on her wrist. His eyes darkened. A royal healer stepped forward and examined the wolf. The healer's face changed the moment he saw the swollen stomach. The white wolf was not just any wolf. She was the Alpha Queen. She carried the last royal heir. The village fell into panic. The hunters who had laughed moments earlier lowered themselves into the snow. The people who had watched the wolf drown now looked terrified. Alara looked at Kale. She expected anger. She expected gratitude. She expected something human. But the Alpha King gave her none of it. He stood slowly. His shadow covered her. "The queen lives because of you." His voice was low. It carried more weight than a shout. Alara looked at the wolf. "She needs help." Kale looked toward his guards. "Take the girl." Alara stared at him. The guards moved forward. Chains closed around her wrists. The cold metal pressed against her broken skin. She pulled back. "I saved her." Kale did not look away. "And now you will come with us." The Wolf Queen was lifted carefully onto a royal carriage. Alara was dragged toward another horse. The villagers watched from the snow. No one defended her. No one spoke her name. The hunter who had called her useless kept his eyes on the ground. Alara looked back at the village, at the broken bridge, at the river that had almost taken her, at the small hut waiting in the distance. She had spent her whole life trying to survive there. Now she was leaving in chains. The palace appeared after nightfall. It stood high above the mountains. Black towers rose into the clouds. Stone wolves guarded the gates. Fire burned in iron bowls along the walls. Alara had never seen anything so large or so cold. The gates opened. The royal riders entered. The Wolf Queen was carried toward the healing chambers. Alara was pulled through the palace halls. Servants stopped and stared. Nobles whispered behind their hands. A girl in torn clothes walked through a kingdom of gold and black stone with chains around her wrists. She felt every eye on her. She felt every judgment. She felt the old shame rising inside her again. The same shame she had felt in the village. The same voice that told her she did not belong anywhere. But then the silver mark on her wrist burned. Alara stopped. The pain moved through her arm. It rose toward her chest. Somewhere deep inside the palace, the Wolf Queen cried out. The sound was weak, broken. Then silence followed. A royal healer ran through the corridor. His face was pale. The queen was dying again. Kale stood at the end of the hall. His eyes found Alara. For the first time his control cracked. Only slightly, but enough. He looked at the girl from the river as if she carried the answer to something he had feared for years. Then the palace doors closed behind her. And Alara understood that saving the wolf had not ended her nightmare. It had only opened the gate to a far darker one. The palace doors closed behind Alara with a sound like thunder. The last glimpse of the snowy courtyard vanished behind black iron. The cold air of the mountains disappeared. In its place came the scent of burning oil and wet stone. The palace was warm, but Alara could not stop shaking. The river had left its cold inside her bones. Two guards pulled her through a narrow hall beneath the royal chambers. Their armor struck against the walls with every step. Their faces stayed hidden beneath dark helmets. They did not look at her. They did not speak to her. Alara tried to slow her breathing. Her wrists hurt beneath the chains. Her hands were still bleeding. The silver mark on her wrist had faded, but it had not disappeared. A pale line rested beneath her skin like moonlight trapped in ice. She looked back once. There was nothing behind her now. No village. No river. No broken hut. Only a long corridor that seemed to swallow every sound. The guards pushed her through a heavy door. The prison chamber was smaller than her hut. It had no window. It had no fire. Water ran down the walls in thin, dark lines. A single torch burned outside the iron bars, and its light did not reach the corners. The chains were removed from her wrists only to be replaced with a thick iron shackle around one ankle.
The door closed.
The guards left. Alara stood alone. For a moment she did not move. She listened. Far above her the palace was alive. Footsteps rushed across stone floors. Doors opened and closed. Voices moved through halls like shadows. Something was happening in the royal chambers.
The queen was dying.
Alara knew it without being told. She sat against the wall and pressed her hands together. Her fingers were swollen. Her palms were torn. Blood had dried in dark lines beneath her nails. The pain should have been the only thing she felt. But another pain was growing inside her. The mark on her wrist began to warm. At first it was only a small heat. Then it spread. Alara lifted her hand. Silver light moved beneath her skin. She held her breath. The light pulsed once. Then again. Each pulse came with a distant sound. A heartbeat. Slow.
Weak.
Not her own. The queen. Alara closed her eyes. The heartbeat stumbled. It grew faint. Then something dark moved through it. A cold taste filled Alara's mouth. Metal. Bitter roots.
Ash.
Her eyes opened. The queen was not dying from the river. Someone was killing her. Alara rose quickly and moved toward the bars. Guard. Her voice hit the empty corridor. No answer came. She grabbed the iron bars. Guard. Footsteps finally approached. A guard appeared from the darkness. He looked tired. His eyes were hard. What do you want? The queen is poisoned. The guard stared at her. Then he laughed once. It was not a loud laugh.
It was worse than that.
It was the sound of someone who had already decided she was worthless. You are in chains and you think you can speak about the queen. Alara looked at him. She is poisoned. The guard stepped closer. You should be careful. The king has not decided what to do with you yet. The queen will die if you do nothing. The guard turned away. Alara struck the bars with both hands. The pain shot through her wrists, but she did not stop. Tell him. The guard paused. For 1 second his face changed. Then he walked away. Alara watched his shadow disappear. She felt rage rise in her chest. Not loud rage. Not wild rage. A deep, silent rage. The same rage she had felt when the hunters stood on the shore and watched the wolf drown.
People saw pain.
They looked away. People saw death. They called it fate. Alara sat down again, but she could not rest. The heartbeat inside her wrist kept weakening. The queen was slipping away. Hours passed. The torch outside the cell burned lower. The palace sounds above became sharper. More footsteps. More voices. More fear. Then the prison door opened. This time 5 guards entered. Behind them came 3 royal healers in long gray robes. Their hands were clean. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were not. They looked at Alara as if she were a sickness. One healer stepped close to the bars. He was old. His beard was white. His eyes were pale and narrow. Show us your wrist. Alara did not move. The healer waited. The guard stepped forward. Alara lifted her hand. The silver mark had grown brighter. Thin lines curled across her skin. They formed a shape that looked like a river flowing around a wolf's paw. The healers stared. The oldest healer swallowed. Fear passed across his face. Alara saw it. You know what this is. The healer's eyes hardened. It is a curse.
No.
It is river sickness.
No.
The old healer leaned closer. You should not speak of things you do not understand. Alara looked directly into his eyes. Then why are you afraid? The healer's face became still. For a moment the corridor was silent. Then a loud cry came from somewhere above them. The queen. Her cry moved through the stone walls. The silver mark on Alara's wrist burst into light. Alara fell to her knees. Pain raced through her arm and into her chest. Her breath broke. The torch outside the cell flickered. The healers stepped back.
She saw the queen.
Not with her eyes. With something deeper. She saw white fur against black sheets. She saw a bowl of dark liquid beside the bed. She saw a hand wearing a gold ring pour something into the bowl. The hand moved quickly. The room was dim. But Alara saw the ring. A wolf head carved in gold. Its eyes were made of red stone. Then the vision vanished. Alara collapsed against the floor. The old healer moved toward her. Take her away. The guards reached for her. Then another voice filled the corridor.
No.
Everything stopped. The guards turned. The healers lowered their heads. Alpha King Kale stood at the end of the corridor. He wore no crown now. His black cloak hung loose over his shoulders. His face looked carved from stone. But his eyes were different from before. They were tired. They were dangerous. He had not slept. Alara could see it in the darkness beneath his eyes. Kale walked toward the cell. The guards stepped aside. The old healer bowed. My king, the girl is unstable. Her mark is dangerous. She should be removed from the palace. Kale did not look at him. His eyes remained on Alara. What did she say? The healer hesitated. She speaks nonsense from fear. Kale's gaze moved to the healer. The old man lowered his eyes. Then Kale looked back at Alara. Alara pushed herself up from the floor. The queen is poisoned. The guards went still. The healers stopped breathing. Kale's face did not change. But the air around him became colder. How do you know? I can feel her. Kale looked at the silver mark. The light moved beneath Alara's skin. She is dying. Alara's voice shook, but she did not look away. Not because of the river. Not because of the cold. Someone has been giving her poison. Kale stood silent. The old healer stepped forward. My king. This girl is trying to place blame on the royal healers. She is desperate to save herself. Alara turned toward him. I saw the poison. The healer's face tightened. You saw nothing. I saw a gold ring. The old healer froze. Only for a moment. But Kale saw it. Everyone saw it. Alara continued. A wolf head. Red stones in its eyes. The corridor became silent again. Kale slowly turned toward the healer. The old man's hands began to shake. It could belong to any noble. Kale stepped closer. His voice was low. Why would you know that? The healer looked up. His face had lost all color. Kale did not wait for an answer. He ordered the cell opened. The guards removed the ankle shackle. Alara stood, but her legs nearly gave out. The river cold still lived inside her. The vision had taken more strength from her than she understood. Kale reached toward her. For 1 second Alara thought he might help her stand. Instead he stopped. His hand remained in the air. Then he pulled it back. The Alpha King did not know how to offer comfort. He only knew how to command. Bring her to the queen. The royal chambers were brighter than the prison, but they felt more dangerous. Torches burned along the walls. Wolves carved from silver watched from every corner. Guards stood outside every door. Their eyes followed Alara as she walked between them. She felt small in her torn clothes. She felt every whisper. The river girl. The cursed girl. The girl who touched the queen. Kale walked ahead of her. He did not turn around. But he slowed his steps when Alara struggled to keep up. The queen's chamber stood at the end of a long hall. 2 massive doors opened. Alara stepped inside. The room smelled of herbs and blood. The white wolf lay on a wide bed of black fur. Her breathing was shallow. Her body trembled beneath thick blankets. Her silver fur had lost its shine. Alara's heart tightened. The wolf that had fought the river now looked smaller than before. The queen lifted her head when Alara entered. Her eyes found Alara. A weak sound came from her throat. Not fear. Recognition. Alara walked closer. The healers watched from the far side of the room. Their faces were tense. The old healer stood near a table covered with bowls and bottles. Alara looked at the table. Her mark burned. One bowl was darker than the others. A thin line of steam rose from it. Alara stopped. That one. The old healer moved in front of the table. It is medicine. Alara looked at Kale. It is poison. Kale walked toward the bowl. The old healer reached for it. Kale caught his wrist. The room went silent. The healer tried to pull away. Kale's grip tightened. The old man fell to his knees. Kale lifted the bowl with his free hand. The liquid inside was black. He held it beneath the queen's nose. The wolf pulled away. Her body shook. Kale's eyes darkened. The old healer began to beg. He said he had been ordered. He said he had no choice. He said the poison was meant to weaken the child. He said the queen was never supposed to die so quickly. Alara stood frozen. The words filled the room like smoke. The unborn heir. They had tried to kill a child before it could take its first breath. Kale released the healer. The old man fell to the floor. Kale looked down at him.
His face was calm now. Too calm.
Who ordered it? The healer shook his head. His mouth opened. But no answer came. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his lips. He touched his mouth. His fingers turned red. Then he collapsed. The poison had reached him too. Someone had made sure he would never speak. The room erupted into movement. Guards rushed forward. Healers shouted for water. Kale stood still. He watched the dead man on the floor. Then he looked toward the dark bowl. The palace was full of enemies. Someone had poisoned the queen. Someone had silenced the healer. Someone was close enough to watch every move inside the royal chambers. Alara moved beside the queen. The white wolf's breathing became uneven again. The poison had left damage behind. Alara placed her wounded hand against the queen's side. The silver mark brightened. Pain moved through her body. She saw darkness inside the queen. Not poison now. A shadow left behind by poison. It was wrapped around the unborn pup like black roots. Alara's breath caught. The child was still in danger. Kale saw her face. What is it? Alara looked at him. The poison is gone. Kale waited. But something is still holding the child. The queen cried out. The sound shook the chamber. The silver mark on Alara's wrist flared brighter than before. Every torch in the room went out. Darkness swallowed the palace. Then a voice moved through the blackness.
Soft. Close.
Not Alara's voice. Not the queen's voice. A whisper from somewhere inside the walls. The river girl must die before the heir wakes. The torches returned. Alara stood beside the queen with silver light burning across her hand. Kale stood near the bed with his eyes fixed on the shadows. The guards searched the chamber. No one was there. But everyone understood. The enemy was no longer hidden. The enemy was inside the palace. And now they knew Alara could see them. The whisper remained in the chamber long after the torches returned. No one moved at first. The guards stared into the corners where darkness still clung to the walls. The healers stood with pale faces and lowered eyes. The queen lay beneath the black fur blankets, with her body trembling from the poison that had almost taken her life. Alara stood beside the bed. Silver light faded slowly from her wrist. Her hand felt numb. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She had heard the voice clearly. The river girl must die before the heir wakes. It had not been a threat spoken in anger. It had been spoken like a plan, like something already decided. Kale stood near the queen with his face turned toward the open doors. His eyes moved across every guard in the chamber. He looked at each of them as if he could see through their armor and into the secrets they carried. Then he lifted one hand. The room became still. No one leaves this floor.
His voice was low.
It did not need to be loud. The guards bowed their heads. The doors closed. Iron locks fell into place. Alara looked at the queen. The white wolf had opened her eyes. They were weak but clear. Her gaze rested on Alara with a quiet trust that made Alara's throat tighten. The queen had trusted her in the river. Now she trusted her in a palace filled with enemies. Alara had never known what it felt like to be trusted. Not like this. Not without fear. She placed her hand gently against the queen's fur. The silver mark gave one small pulse. The queen breathed easier. Kale noticed. His eyes moved from Alara's hand to her face. You will not return to the prison. Alara looked up. For a moment she did not understand.
Then she looked toward the guards.
The chains were gone. The ankle shackle was gone. The iron door that had held her was far below them now. Still she did not feel free. A palace could be a prison without bars. Kale turned toward the captain of the guard. Place 2 wolves outside this door. No one enters without my order. The captain bowed. Kale looked at Alara again. You will remain near the queen. Alara felt the weight of every eye in the room. The healers looked angry. The guards looked uncertain. The servants looked afraid. She was still the river girl in torn clothes. But now the Alpha King had placed her beside the royal bed. That made her dangerous. Not because she wanted power, because the palace believed she had it. The next morning the sun rose behind thick gray clouds. Its light entered the palace through narrow windows and painted the stone halls with cold silver. Alara woke on a small bed near the queen's chamber. She had slept only a few hours. Every sound had pulled her awake. A door opening. A guard changing position. A servant carrying water. The palace did not feel like a home. It felt like an animal holding its breath. Alara stood and washed the dried blood from her hands. The cuts had begun to close, but they still burned. The silver mark had changed during the night. It was no longer a thin line. It curved around her wrist like a flowing river. She touched it. The moment her fingers brushed the mark, she saw a flash of black water. A stone hall beneath the palace. A wolf carved into a wall. A woman standing in front of it. The woman wore a cloak made from pale gray fur. Her hair was dark like Alara's. Her wrist carried the same silver mark. Then the vision vanished. Alara stumbled back. Her breath caught. She had never seen that woman before. But something inside her knew her. The door opened. Kale entered alone. He looked different in daylight. The crown was gone. His black hair fell loose around his face. He still carried the same cold strength, but now Alara could see the exhaustion beneath it. He had not slept either. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The queen breathed softly behind them. Kale looked toward her. She is stronger. Alara nodded. For now. Kale's jaw tightened. He did not ask what that meant. He already knew. The poison had not ended.
It had only changed.
Alara looked at him. There is something beneath this palace. Kale turned back toward her. What did you see? A chamber. Old stone. A wolf carved into the wall. A woman with this mark. Kale stared at her wrist. His face became still. Then he walked to the door and opened it. Come with me. The guards outside looked surprised when Alara stepped into the corridor beside the Alpha King. Their eyes followed her. Some lowered their heads. Some did not. Kale led her through halls she had not seen before. They passed the throne room where tall black pillars reached toward the ceiling. They passed walls covered with banners of old wolf kings. They passed narrow stairs that descended deeper into the mountain. The farther they went, the colder the air became. The palace sounds faded behind them. At the bottom of the stairs stood a door made from dark wood and silver metal. A wolf was carved into its center. Its eyes were empty holes. Kale placed his hand against the door. Nothing happened. Alara stepped closer. The silver mark on her wrist began to glow. The empty eyes of the carved wolf filled with pale light. A deep sound rolled through the stone. The door opened. Cold air rushed out. Inside was a chamber older than the palace above. The walls were covered in faded paintings. Wolves stood beside humans. Kings stood beside women carrying silver marks. Rivers flowed around thrones. Dark figures knelt in chains beneath a full moon. Alara moved slowly through the chamber. Her heart beat hard. She had seen these symbols in her vision. Kale stood behind her. This place was sealed before I was born. Alara looked at the wall. A woman with dark hair stood beside the first Alpha King. Her hand rested against his chest. The silver mark on her wrist glowed like fire. Beneath the painting were words carved into stone. Kale read them quietly. The river guardians see the poison before it reaches the crown. Alara looked at him. The mark is not a curse. Kale did not answer at first. His eyes moved across the old paintings. The council said the river guardians betrayed the throne. They lied. Kale's face darkened. The word did not sound like anger. It sounded like something breaking. 4 generations the council had taught the kingdom that river blood was dangerous. They had turned Alara's people into shadows. They had made the world fear the very guardians meant to protect it. Alara looked at the woman in the painting. She looked like me. Kale stepped closer to the wall. She may have been your ancestor. The thought settled inside Alara like a flame. She had spent her life believing she came from nothing. Now the walls of the Alpha Palace told her that her blood had once stood beside kings. But the discovery did not bring comfort. It brought danger. If the council knew she was a river guardian, then they would never stop hunting her. A sound came from the hallway. Footsteps. Kale turned sharply. The chamber door was still open. A young guard stood at the bottom of the stairs. His face was pale. His breathing was hard. My king. Kale's eyes narrowed. What happened? The queen is awake. Alara ran before Kale could move. She rushed up the stairs. Her boots struck the stone. Her breath burned in her chest. The palace halls blurred around her. When she reached the royal chamber, the doors were open, and guards stood outside with drawn weapons. Inside, the queen was no longer lying still. She stood on weak legs near the window. Her white fur shone beneath the gray morning light. She looked toward Alara. Then she turned her head toward the north. A low sound came from her throat. Not pain. Warning. Alara walked closer. The queen's silver eyes were fixed on the distant mountains. The unborn heir moved beneath her body. The silver mark on Alara's wrist pulsed. She saw another vision. A line of black wolves moving through snow. Men carrying banners with no royal mark. A fire burning in a camp beyond the northern ridge. Then she saw a man standing beside the fire. He wore a dark cloak. A gold ring shaped like a wolf head shone on his hand. Alara gasped. Kale entered behind her. What did you see? An army. Kale went still. Where? North of the mountain ridge. The queen let out another low cry. Kale looked toward the window. The northern border was supposed to be protected by royal wolves. No army should have been able to gather there without his command, unless someone inside the palace had opened the way. The council had not only poisoned the queen. They were preparing for war. That evening, Kale called the royal council into the throne hall. Alara was not invited. She stood behind a hidden door near the upper gallery, with 2 guards beside her. Kale had ordered her to listen. Below her, the council gathered around the black throne. They wore rich cloaks and silver chains. Their faces carried the calm pride of people who believed the palace belonged to them. Kale sat on the throne. His crown rested on his head. His face showed no emotion. He spoke of the northern border. He spoke of reports that enemy forces were gathering in the snow. The council members denied everything. They claimed the border was safe. They claimed Kale had been misled by fear. They claimed the queen's illness had weakened his judgment. Alara watched them. One man stood near the front. He was tall and gray-haired.
His cloak was deep red.
A gold ring shone on his hand. A wolf head. Red stones in its eyes. Alara's body went cold. She knew that ring. She had seen it beside the bowl of poison. Her breath caught. The man looked up. For 1 second his eyes found the hidden gallery. He could not see Alara clearly, but he seemed to feel her presence. His mouth curved into a small smile. Then he turned back toward Kale. The council leader spoke softly. My king, the kingdom needs peace. It needs certainty. It cannot survive more fear. Kale looked at him. The throne hall became silent. Alara expected Kale to accuse him. She expected guards to seize him. But Kale only nodded. You are right. The council leader smiled. Kale continued. The kingdom needs certainty. His voice remained calm. So, I will send new orders to the northern border tonight. The council leader's smile faded slightly. Kale rose from the throne. I will also send a message to every commander. No movement. No gathering. No gate opens without my seal. The council members bowed. The meeting ended. They left one by one. The man with the wolf ring was the last to go. As he passed beneath the gallery, he looked up again. This time Alara saw his eyes clearly. They were cold. They were patient. He knew she had seen him. Later that night, Kale met Alara in a small war room behind the throne hall. Maps covered the walls. Wooden wolves marked the border roads. Lamps burned low across a long table. Kale placed 3 sealed letters before his captain. One goes to the Eastern Guard. The captain nodded. One goes to the Southern Guard. The captain nodded again. Kale placed the 3rd letter down slowly. And this one goes north. Alara looked at the seal. It was different from the others. Kale noticed. It carries false orders. The captain looked up. My king. If the council has spies at the border, then they will move when they read it. Alara understood. Kale was setting a trap. He would give the traitors a lie and wait to see who carried it. The Alpha King was no longer only watching. He was hunting. Days passed with no answer. The queen grew weaker again. The shadow around the unborn heir did not disappear. Alara could feel it whenever she touched the queen. It was waiting. It was patient. The palace grew colder. Nobles stopped greeting Alara in the halls. Servants stopped bringing her food unless guards watched them. One evening she found black ash scattered outside her door. A warning. Another night, she woke to find a dead raven placed on her window ledge. Its wings were frozen open. Its eyes had been removed. The palace wanted her afraid. At first she was. Every shadow made her turn. Every whisper made her heart race. But fear began to change. It became attention. It became strength. Alara stopped walking with her eyes lowered. She watched the servants. She watched the guards. She watched the doors that opened too quietly. She listened when people thought she could not hear. The river girl was learning the palace. And the palace was learning that she would not disappear. Then the false orders returned. Not as a letter. As blood. A royal messenger staggered through the gates at dawn. His horse collapsed beneath him. His cloak was torn. An arrow was buried in his shoulder. Kale stood in the courtyard as the messenger fell into the snow. The man held a broken piece of parchment in his hand. The seal belonged to Kale. The false northern orders had reached someone, and that someone had sent soldiers to destroy the messenger before he could return. Kale opened the blood-stained parchment. His face became darker with every word. Alara stood beside the queen's carriage and watched him. The captain moved closer. My king. Kale looked up. The northern gates are already open. The courtyard fell silent. The traitors had taken the bait. But they had moved faster than Kale expected. Beyond the mountains, an army was gathering. Inside the palace, the council still smiled. And somewhere in the dark halls, a voice that wanted Alara dead was waiting for its next chance. That night, Alara returned to the queen's chamber. The white wolf was restless. Her breathing had become sharp. Her body curled around the unborn heir. Alara placed her hand against the queen's side. The silver mark burst into light. A new vision opened before her. She saw the council leader standing in a hidden chamber. He held a black vial in one hand. In the other hand, he held a blade. Around him stood armored men with no royal marks. Behind them was a cradle made of dark wood. Empty. Waiting. Then the council leader spoke into the shadows. The heir will be born before the moon turns. Alara pulled her hand away. Her face went pale. Kale entered the chamber at that moment. He saw the fear in her eyes. What did you see? Alara looked toward the queen. Then she looked at the Alpha King. The enemy is not waiting at the border. Kale stepped closer. Alara's voice became quiet. It is waiting for the heir to be born. Outside the chamber, a door closed softly. Neither Alara nor Kale had heard anyone approach. But when the guards searched the corridor, they found only one thing. A small silver dagger lying on the floor. Its blade was clean. Its handle carried the mark of the royal council. And wrapped around it was a strip of cloth stained with fresh blood. Alara's blood. The strip of cloth lay in Kale's hand like a piece of winter sky stained by war. Alara stared at it from the doorway of the queen's chamber. The blood was still wet. It had been torn from the sleeve of her old dress. She remembered the place where the fabric had ripped when the guards dragged her through the palace on the first night. Someone had kept it. Someone had waited. Now they had left it outside the queen's door with a silver dagger carrying the mark of the royal council. The message was clear. They could reach Alara whenever they wanted. They could reach the queen. They could reach the unborn heir. Kale stood very still. The guards waited for his order. The queen breathed heavily behind Alara. Her body had curled tighter around the life inside her. Her silver eyes were open. They watched Kale with the same fear that had filled them beneath the ice of Blackwater River. The Alpha King closed his hand around the cloth. His fingers tightened. The blood disappeared inside his fist. "Seal the palace." His voice was quiet. The captain bowed. Kale looked toward the corridor. Every gate, every stair, every passage beneath the throne hall. The captain hesitated. "My king, the council will demand to know why." Kale lifted his eyes. "Let them demand." The captain lowered his head and left at once. The sound of boots began to fill the palace. Doors slammed shut. Iron bars fell across the lower gates. Wolves moved through the halls in dark armor. Servants were sent away from the royal floor. Nobles were ordered into their chambers. The palace had become a locked cage. But Alara knew cages could trap the innocent as easily as the guilty. Kale turned toward her. His face was calm. Too calm. The rage inside him had gone beyond fire. It had become ice. "You will not leave this room." Alara looked at the dagger. "They want me afraid." Kale stepped closer. "They want you dead." Alara lifted her chin. "Then hiding me will not stop them." For a moment Kale said nothing. The silence between them grew heavy. He had spent his life giving orders. People obeyed because they feared the king. But Alara did not look away. She had been afraid of him when he took her from the riverbank. She had been afraid of the palace. She had been afraid of every shadow in these halls. Now fear was no longer enough to control her.
Kale saw it.
"You do not understand what they are capable of." Alara looked toward the queen. "I understand exactly what they are capable of." The queen gave a weak cry. Her body jerked beneath the blankets. Alara rushed to her side. The silver mark on her wrist began to burn. She placed her hand against the queen's fur. At once she saw darkness. Not the dark roots around the unborn heir. Something worse. She saw the palace gates open beneath a moonless sky. She saw noble families walking through the halls with hidden weapons under their cloaks. She saw guards removing royal banners from the walls. She saw the council leaders standing in the throne hall before an empty black throne. Then she saw Kale. His hands were bound. His crown lay broken on the floor. The council leader stood over him. The vision vanished. Alara pulled back with a sharp breath. Kale watched her. "What did you see?" "They are coming tonight." The queen cried out again. The sound was different now. It was deeper. It carried through the chamber and into the halls. The unborn heir was coming early. Kale looked toward the door. The council had planned everything around this moment. The queen had been poisoned. The border had been opened. The palace had been filled with spies. Now the heir would be born while Kale's enemies stood close enough to take the throne. The Alpha King did not move for a long time. Then he walked to the window. Outside the snow had stopped falling. The mountains stood black beneath the night sky. Torches burned along the palace walls. Wolves moved below like shadows. Kale had once believed power meant having everyone beneath him. Now he understood that power meant knowing who stood beside him when the world began to fall. He turned back. "Bring the old guard." The captain returned within minutes. Behind him came warriors with scarred faces and worn armor. They were older than the palace guards. Some limped. Some carried old wounds across their hands. Their cloaks were plain. Their eyes were sharp. These were wolves who had fought beside Kale before the council filled the palace with polished men and false loyalty. They had been pushed aside, ignored, forgotten. But Kale had not forgotten them. He looked at each warrior. Tonight the throne will be tested. No one spoke.
Kale continued.
Some of you were told I no longer trusted you. The old wolves stood silent. Some of you were sent away because the council called you too old, too damaged, too loyal to the wrong king. The captain's face tightened. Kale stepped down from the window. They were wrong. The old wolves lifted their heads. Kale's voice became colder. The palace belongs to those who protect it, not those who hide behind it. The warriors struck their fists against their chests. The sound rolled through the chamber. Elara watched them. For the first time since entering the palace, she saw something change. Not in the walls, not in the guards. In Kale. The king who had stood alone was beginning to gather the people his enemies had thrown away. The council had thought they had weakened him. They had only cleared the path for him to see who was real. The queen's pain grew stronger. The royal healers moved around her bed with shaking hands. New healers had been brought from the outer villages. Kale trusted none of them fully. 2 old guard wolves stood beside every table. Every bottle was checked. Every cloth was inspected. Elara remained close to the queen. She held the white wolf's paw. The queen's claws pressed weakly against her hand. The silver mark glowed between them. Elara could feel the unborn heir now. Not as a heartbeat, as a presence. Small,
fierce,
trapped beneath the shadow left by poison. The child was fighting. Elara leaned close to the queen. You are not alone. The queen's eyes met hers. A soft sound left her throat. Elara understood it without words. The queen was afraid. Not for herself.
For her child.
Elara pressed her hand more firmly against the queen's fur. I will not let them take your child. Outside the chamber, the first bell rang. One deep strike. Then another. The palace gates had been attacked. Kale's old guard moved into the corridors. The captain came through the door with blood on his shoulder. My king. The western gate has fallen. Kale did not flinch. How many? More than we expected. Palace guards have joined them. The betrayal had stepped into the open. Kale looked toward Elara. Then toward the queen. Then toward the captain. Hold the royal floor. The captain bowed. Kale reached for his sword. The black blade slid from its sheath with a sound that made the room colder. Elara looked at him. You cannot leave. Kale's eyes met hers. If I stay here, then they will take the throne without a fight. They want you in the throne hall. Kale stepped closer. They want a king who still fears losing a chair made of stone. His voice lowered. They will find a king who has already lost everything he was afraid to lose. Then he left. The door closed behind him. The palace shook with the sound of battle. Elara heard boots running through halls. She heard metal strike metal. She heard wolves roar in anger. She heard men shouting orders that no longer mattered. The queen's chamber became a small island inside a storm. The old guard held the doors. The healers worked. Elara stayed beside the queen. But the silver mark kept burning. The shadow around the unborn heir was moving. It was waking. Elara closed her eyes. She reached toward it. The darkness fought her. It showed her the river. It showed her the village hunters laughing. It showed her the prison cell. It showed her every moment when she had felt small. Every moment when she had believed the world was right to leave her alone. The shadow fed on fear. It wanted her to believe she was still the useless river girl. Elara's body shook. Her hand began to slip from the queen's fur. Then she remembered the wolf beneath the ice. She remembered how it had trusted her when no one else had. She remembered Kale standing alone beneath his crown. She remembered the old warriors lifting their heads when the king called them back. Elara opened her eyes. I am not what they called me. The silver mark flared. Light moved through the queen's body. The darkness pulled back. For one moment, the unborn heir's heartbeat became strong. Then the chamber doors exploded inward. 3 armored men rushed through the smoke. They wore no royal colors. Their faces were hidden. The old guard met them at once. Steel flashed. One guard fell. Another drove his blade into an attacker's chest. Elara stayed beside the queen. She could not leave. The queen's body was too weak. The child was too close. One attacker broke through the fight. He moved toward Elara with a short blade in his hand. His steps were fast. His eyes were empty. Alara reached for the silver light inside her. But fear froze her for 1 second. The blade rose. Then the queen moved. Her body was weak. Her breath was broken. But she lunged from the bed with a roar that shook the chamber. Her claws struck the attacker across the chest. He fell backward. The old guard finished him before he could rise. The queen collapsed beside Alara. Blood stained her white fur. Alara pulled her close. The queen had protected her, even while dying, even while carrying the air. Alara felt something inside her change. The river mark burned brighter than ever before. Not with fear, with fury. The palace had tried to make her helpless. The council had tried to make her disappear. But every attack had only pushed her closer to the power sleeping inside her blood. The chamber walls began to glow. Old symbols appeared beneath the stone. Silver lines spread across the floor. The healers backed away in terror. Alara's hair lifted in the rising wind. The mark on her wrist opened like a river of light. She saw the ancient guardian woman again. This time the woman did not stand in silence. She reached toward Alara. A memory entered her mind. The first river guardian standing beside the first Alpha King. The guardian did not serve the throne. She protected the life inside it. She protected the truth when kings became blind. She protected the air when wolves became hungry for power. Alara understood. The mark had never been meant to make her a weapon. It had been meant to make her a shield. The queen's breathing slowed. The unborn heir's heartbeat began to fade again. Alara placed both hands against the queen's side. Silver light rushed into the dark roots. Pain tore through her arms. Her knees hit the floor. The shadow screamed without sound. It fought to stay. It wrapped tighter around the child. Alara pushed harder. Outside the chamber the battle grew louder. Then suddenly it stopped. A deep silence spread through the palace. The old guard at the door looked toward the corridor. No footsteps came. No shouts. No steel. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes before something terrible. Then the throne bells began to ring. Not the warning bells. The coronation bells. One strike. Then another. The council had reached the throne hall. They were declaring a new ruler. Alara looked toward the door.
Kale was out there,
alone against the people who had betrayed him. The queen gave a sharp cry. Her body tightened. The child was coming. At the same moment the silver mark showed Alara another vision. Kale stood in the throne hall. His sword was covered in blood. The council leader faced him with guards behind him. But there was something else in the hall. A black vial rested near the throne. The same poison. The council leader was not trying to kill Kale. He was trying to force Kale to choose. The throne. Or the queen and heir. Alara opened her eyes. The palace was shaking. The queen was going into labor. The enemy had surrounded the throne. And somewhere beyond the walls the northern gates stood open for an army that was already moving closer. The night had become a blade. And before dawn one kingdom would belong to the Alpha King. Or to the men who had spent years waiting to destroy him. The coronation bells rang through the palace, while the queen fought for every breath. Each strike moved through the stone walls. Each strike told the kingdom that someone had claimed the throne. Alara knelt beside the white wolf queen with both hands pressed against her side. Silver light flowed from the mark on her wrist. It moved through the queen like a river beneath ice. The dark roots around the unborn heir twisted against it. They fought to stay alive. The queen cried out again. Her claws scraped across the floor. Her body shook with pain. Alara held on. The old guard formed a wall around the chamber door. Their armor was covered in blood. Their breathing was heavy. They had fought through the night without rest. They knew more enemies could come at any moment. Outside the room the palace had become silent again. Not peaceful. Never peaceful. It was the silence of people waiting to see who would survive. Alara closed her eyes. She could feel the air. The small heartbeat was weak. But it was still there. It was fighting. The child had never seen the world. Yet already it was surrounded by darkness. Already it was being hunted by people who feared what it could become. Alara remembered the village. She remembered the hunters standing beside the river. They had looked at the trapped wolf and decided its life meant nothing. They had looked at Alara and decided she meant nothing too. They had been wrong. The council had made the same mistake. They had seen a poor girl in torn clothes. They had seen a frightened stranger. They had never seen the strength growing beneath her skin. Alara opened her eyes. The silver mark burned brighter. I will not let them decide who lives. The queen's eyes opened. They were full of pain, but they were also full of trust. Alara leaned closer. You carried this child through poison, through fear, through betrayal. You are still here. The queen gave a weak sound. Alara pressed her hands harder against the white fur. The light rushed forward. The dark roots around the air pulled back. For one breath the child's heartbeat became clear, strong. Then the palace floor shook. A deep roar moved through the halls. The old guard turned toward the door. One of them looked at Alara. The throne hall. Alara knew. Kale was still fighting. The queen cried out again. Her body tightened. The air was coming. The healers moved closer. Their faces were pale. Their hands shook as they prepared cloth and water. No one spoke above a whisper. Every movement felt too loud. Alara stayed beside the queen. She could not leave. Not yet. The silver mark showed her flashes of the throne hall. Kale stood beneath the black banners. His sword was dark with blood. Broken armor covered the floor. The council leader stood before him, with a black vial in his hand. Behind him were nobles who had once bowed to Kale. Now, they stood behind the traitor. They believed the Alpha King was finished. They believed the queen would die. They believed the heir would never breathe. They believed Alara would remain trapped in the royal chambers while they took everything. But Kale did not kneel. He stood alone before the throne.
His crown was gone.
His cloak was torn. Blood ran down one side of his face.
Still he stood.
The council leader raised the black vial. The poison inside it moved like smoke. He wanted Kale to surrender. He wanted the Alpha King to choose the throne over his family. He wanted Kale to become the weak ruler they had always believed he was. But Kale looked at the throne. Then he looked at the traitor. And something inside him became still. He had spent years protecting a throne that had never protected him. He had followed old laws written by men who had feared change. He had trusted a council that had smiled while it poisoned his queen. He had tried to rule through restraint. He had tried to keep peace with people who only understood control. That king was gone. Kale stepped away from the throne. The council leader smiled. He thought Kale was surrendering. Then Kale lifted his sword. Not toward the traitor. Toward the black throne. The blade came down. The first strike split the arm of the throne. The second strike shattered the wolf crown carved into its back. The third strike broke the seat where generations of kings had sat while the council whispered behind them. Stone crashed across the floor. The sound rolled through the hall. The nobles stepped back. The council leader's smile disappeared. Kale stood before the broken throne. His voice carried through the hall. This throne made kings weak. No one moved. Kale looked at the wolves who had betrayed him. It made loyalty a chain. His eyes moved to the council leader. It made traitors believe they could own the crown. The council leader lifted the vial. Guards moved forward. But Kale's old guard entered the throne hall from every door. They came through smoke and blood. They came with the royal banners in their hands. Behind them came palace guards who had thrown down the council colors. They had seen the truth. They had seen the queen poisoned. They had seen the council open the northern gates. They had seen Kale stand alone when every false noble turned against him. The power inside the hall began to shift. The council leader looked around. His army was still there, but their eyes had changed. They were no longer looking at him. They were looking at Kale. The Alpha King stepped forward. The council leader tried to speak. He tried to claim that Kale had failed the kingdom. He tried to blame Alara. He tried to call the River Guardian a curse. But Kale did not allow his lies to grow. He raised one hand. The old captain stepped forward, carrying a wooden box. Inside were the black poison vials. Inside were the false border orders. Inside were the seals used to open the northern gates. Inside was the proof that the council had planned the death of the queen and the heir. The hall went silent. The council leader looked at the evidence. Then he looked at the wolves around him. Fear entered his eyes for the first time. Kale spoke again. The queen was poisoned by men who called themselves protectors. His voice became colder. The air was hunted before it could breathe. He looked toward the broken throne. The border was opened by men who claimed they served this kingdom. The council leader backed away. Kale moved closer. You did not betray me. The traitor looked up. Kale's eyes were dark. You betrayed every wolf who trusted this crown. The council leader reached for the black vial. He tried to throw it, but Kale moved faster. His sword struck the vial from the traitor's hand. It shattered against the stone. Black poison spread across the floor. Smoke rose. The council leader fell backward. He looked around for help. No one came. The nobles who had stood behind him lowered their heads. The guards who had followed him dropped their weapons. The council had built its power through fear. Now fear had turned against them. Kale did not kill the traitor quickly. He ordered him taken alive. He ordered every council member placed in iron chains. He ordered their names carried to every village and every border post. The kingdom would know who had poisoned its queen. The kingdom would know who had tried to steal its heir. The kingdom would know that the old council was finished. Then Kale turned toward the royal chambers. For the first time that night, fear touched his face. Not fear for the throne. Fear for the lives waiting beyond the hall. He ran. The Alpha King ran through the palace with blood on his armor and broken stone dust on his cloak. Guards followed behind him. The old captain called orders, but Kale did not slow down. The queen's chamber doors opened before him. He entered. The room was filled with silver light. Alara knelt on the floor. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale. The queen lay beside her with her body still and exhausted. For one terrible second, Kale could not see the child. His heart stopped. Then a small cry filled the chamber. It was soft. It was weak. But it was alive. The sound changed everything. The healers stepped aside. Between the queen's white fur rested a newborn wolf pup. Its fur was pale silver. Its eyes were still closed. Its tiny body moved with each breath. The queen lifted her head. She looked at Kale. Then she looked at Alara. The queen placed one paw near the child. Alara's silver mark glowed softly beside it. The darkness was gone. The poison was gone. The heir had survived. Kale fell to one knee beside the queen. His hand touched the pup gently. The Alpha King, who had faced an army, did not speak. His eyes closed. For one quiet moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what had almost been lost. Alara watched him. She saw the king beneath the armor. She saw the man who had carried a kingdom alone. She saw the fear he had hidden behind every command. Kale opened his eyes and looked at her. You saved them. Alara shook her head. The queen saved her child. Kale looked toward the white wolf. Then back toward Alara. You saved all of us. The words stayed in the chamber. They were not loud. They did not need to be. Alara had waited her whole life for someone to see her. Not as a curse. Not as a burden. Not as a river girl who belonged alone in the cold. Kale saw her. The queen saw her. The air breathed because she had refused to let fear decide her place. But the night was not over. The old captain entered the chamber with snow on his shoulders. My king.
Kale stood.
The northern army has crossed the border. The room became silent. The council had fallen. The heir had survived. But the enemy empire was already moving toward the kingdom. Kale looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the mountains were black. Far away, fires burned across the snow. The enemy had expected to find a broken palace. They had expected civil war. They had expected Kale to be weak. Instead, they would find an Alpha King who had nothing left to lose. Kale looked at Alara. You should remain here with the queen and the heir. Alara stood slowly. Her body was weak from the guardian power. Her hands still glowed faintly, but her eyes were clear.
No.
Kale watched her. The border is not safe. Alara looked toward the sleeping pup. Neither was this palace. The old captain waited. Kale did not argue. He had learned that Alara was not someone to hide behind walls. She had walked into a frozen river when everyone else stood watching. She had faced poison and shadows and blades. She had carried the old guardian power into the heart of the palace. Now she would not remain behind while another threat came for the kingdom she had helped save. Before dawn, Kale led his wolves north. The army moved through snow beneath a dark sky. Old guards rode beside young wolves. Palace warriors who had once served the council marched in silence. Their banners carried the royal wolf again. But the banner had changed. The broken throne was no longer carved above it. In its place was a silver river flowing beneath a wolf crown. Alara rode beside Kale. The queen remained in the palace with the newborn heir and the strongest guards. But her silver eyes followed Alara until the gates closed. The journey north was hard. Wind cut across the mountains. Snow covered the roads. The enemy empire had built camps near the open border gates. Their fires burned like red eyes in the distance. Their soldiers believed the kingdom would surrender before the first battle. Kale stood on a ridge above the valley. Below him the enemy army waited. They had more men, more weapons, more banners. But they did not have what Kale had found in the palace. They did not have loyalty. They did not have a king who had survived betrayal. They did not have a river guardian whose blood could see the darkness before it moved. Alara stood beside Kale. Her mark began to glow. She looked across the valley. I can see their path. Kale turned toward her. Their strongest line is near the river. Alara pointed toward the frozen water cutting through the valley. They think the ice will hold. Kale looked at the river. Then he looked at his army. The enemy had opened the border through betrayal. Now Kale would use the land itself against them. The battle began at sunrise. The enemy marched forward through snow and smoke. Their horns called across the valley. Their soldiers moved toward the royal wolves with confidence. Kale waited. He did not rush. He did not give them the fight they expected. Alara stood near the frozen river with the old guard around her. Her silver mark shone through the storm. She placed her hand against the ice. The river answered. Cracks moved beneath the enemy line. At first the enemy soldiers did not notice. Then the ice broke. The frozen river opened beneath their strongest force. Men fell into black water. Their banners vanished beneath the current. Panic spread through the army. Kale raised his sword. The royal wolves charged. They moved through the broken enemy line like a storm. Kale led from the front. His black armor cut through the snow. His sword rose and fell. Every step carried the rage of a king who had been betrayed by his own throne. The enemy commanders tried to regroup. But Kale's wolves surrounded them. The old guard fought beside the young. The palace warriors fought beside the border wolves. The kingdom that had been divided by fear now stood together. By sunset the enemy banners burned in the snow. The border was closed. The commanders who had led the invasion were brought before Kale in chains. They expected death. Instead, Kale ordered them return to their empire. He ordered them to carry one message. The Alpha King had not survived the night. He had changed because of it. No empire would cross his border again. No council would control his crown again. No enemy would touch his family and remain untouched. When Kale returned to the palace, the people filled the roads. Villagers came from the mountains. Wolves came from distant forests. Servants and guards stood beneath the royal gates. They had heard what happened. They had heard about the poison. They had heard about the broken throne. They had heard about the river girl who saved the queen and the heir. Alara walked beside Kale through the open gates. She wore no crown. She wore no royal dress.
Her clothes were still simple.
But the silver mark on her wrist shone in the evening light. The people lowered their heads. Not because she demanded it, because they understood. She was no longer the girl they could mock beside the river. She was the guardian who had returned truth to the throne. Inside the palace, Kale entered the throne hall. The broken black throne was gone. In its place stood a new seat made from dark wood and silver stone. It was smaller. It stood lower. There were no hidden steps behind it. No shadows where a council could whisper. Above it was the symbol of the wolf and the river. Kale did not sit at once. He looked at Alara. Then he looked at the gathered wolves. The old kingdom ended when the council chose poison over loyalty. His voice moved through the hall. The new kingdom begins with those who protect life. He placed Alara beside the throne. Not below it, beside it. The hall remained silent. Then the old captain struck his fist against his chest. The guards followed. The wolves followed. The sound filled the palace. Kale finally sat on the new throne. Not as a king trapped by old laws. Not as a ruler surrounded by false loyalty. He sat as the Alpha King who had broken the system built to control him. Alara stood beside him. Far above the palace, the northern sky opened. The storm clouds moved away. A pale moon rose over the mountains. Its light touched the silver river mark on Alara's wrist. For one moment the mark burned brighter than before. Alara looked toward the distant horizon. Beyond the northern border, there were other kingdoms, other thrones, other rulers who had heard that Kale's counsel had fallen. Some would fear him. Some would test him. Some would believe the Alpha King had only won one battle. They did not understand. Kale had not simply reclaimed his throne. He had become something the world had not seen in generations. A king who could not be controlled. A king who had turned betrayal into power. A king who had found his greatest strength beside the girl everyone had abandoned. The palace bells rang again. This time they did not announce a false coronation. They announced the birth of an heir. They announced the fall of traitors. They announced the rise of a new kingdom. And far beyond the mountains another fire appeared in the darkness. A larger army was gathering. A greater empire had heard the bells. The Alpha King looked toward the horizon. Alara stood beside him. Neither of them looked away. The first battle had ended. The empire was only beginning. No one knew why she kept disappearing every night. While the Alpha King's palace slept beneath the freezing snow, she walked alone toward the cursed stable where the dying wolves had been abandoned. The guards laughed at her. The servants called her mad. The royal healers had already declared every wolf beyond saving. They believed nothing could survive inside that broken shelter. But every morning something impossible happened. Another wolf stood on its feet. Another pair of lifeless eyes opened again. The beasts that had nearly torn apart every royal physician rested peacefully beside a young woman who owned nothing except torn blankets, warm hands, and a heart that refused to give up. Then one freezing dawn, the Alpha King followed mysterious footprints through the snow. He expected to find a thief. He expected to find an enemy. Instead, he found a woman sleeping in the middle of his legendary wolf pack, while the most feared beasts in the kingdom guarded her like family. In that single moment, the Alpha King realized someone had hidden both a miracle and a deadly betrayal inside his own kingdom. And the truth waiting inside that forgotten stable would change his empire forever. The Alpha King had defeated every enemy who had dared to challenge his throne. Kingdom after kingdom had fallen beneath his command. Rivers had turned red during his wars. Mountains had echoed with the howls of his victorious wolves. Every child in the north grew up hearing only one warning: never stand against the Alpha King. Never cross the ruler whose wolves could smell fear before a sword was ever drawn. His empire stretched farther than anyone could see. His banner flew over forests, rivers, valleys, and frozen mountains. To the world, he looked invincible, untouchable, born to rule forever. But even the strongest empire can hide a wound that no one is allowed to see. Long before sunrise, the fortress stood silent beneath a blanket of white snow. The great walls disappeared into the darkness, while icy winds whispered through empty towers. Guards walked their patrols with lowered heads. Servants hurried through frozen courtyards without speaking. Something had changed inside the palace during the past few months. Laughter had disappeared. Hope had grown quiet. Every hallway carried the heavy feeling that something precious was slowly slipping away. Deep behind the fortress stood an old stable that no one visited anymore. Years ago, it had been the proud shelter of the king's greatest wolves. The strongest beasts in the kingdom had once rested there after returning from glorious battles. Their names had been spoken with honor. Their footsteps had shaken the earth. They had guarded the Alpha King through blood, fire, and endless war. Now that same stable had become a place people avoided. Its wooden walls leaned under years of snow. Broken windows allowed freezing winds to sweep through the darkness. Rotten straw covered the floor. Weak breathing echoed from every corner. The wolves inside were dying. Some could barely lift their heads. Others no longer opened their eyes. Their thick white fur had become dull beneath sickness that no royal healer could understand. Every morning another wolf failed to wake. Every evening another body disappeared before sunset. No prayers were spoken. No honor was given. The wolves who had once defended the kingdom were quietly forgotten. The servants refused to enter. The soldiers looked away. Even the royal physicians had surrendered after every treatment failed. People began calling the place cursed. They believed death itself had chosen the stable as its home. No one noticed that every single night another pair of footsteps appeared in the snow. Soft footsteps. Small footsteps. Patient footsteps. A young woman wrapped in worn clothing crossed the frozen courtyard while darkness still covered the kingdom. Her boots were cracked. Her hands were red from endless cold. Snow gathered across her shoulders, yet she never slowed down. She carried a small bundle beneath her arm. Inside were wild herbs gathered from frozen hills, pieces of dry bread saved from her own meals, torn blankets stitched together by tired hands, a clay bottle filled with warm water that had taken hours to prepare. Nothing she carried held value inside the palace. Everything she carried meant life inside the stable. She quietly pushed open the heavy wooden door. The smell of sickness filled the cold air. Weak wolves lifted their tired eyes toward her. None of them growled. None of them bared their teeth. Instead, they watched her with silent recognition. She smiled gently despite the freezing air. "Good morning, my brave ones," she whispered softly. One by one she knelt beside every wolf. She cleaned infected wounds. She changed damp straw. She wrapped aching paws with clean cloth. She placed herbs beneath tired noses, hoping the healing scent would ease their breathing. She worked slowly, carefully, patiently. There was no audience. No reward waited for her. No one would ever know what happened inside these broken walls. Yet she returned every single night. When the work finally ended, she sat beside the oldest wolf. Its breathing came slowly. Its silver eyes had almost lost their light. She gently rested one hand upon its thick neck. "You carried a king through countless battles," she whispered. "You deserve better than dying alone." The old wolf slowly leaned against her shoulder. Outside, the wind screamed across the empty courtyard. Inside the stable, only silence answered. Hours passed. Snow continued falling. The young woman refused to leave. She wrapped herself inside one torn blanket, then lay beside the sick wolves. One by one they moved closer until warm bodies surrounded her from every side. They trusted her, not because she was powerful, not because she commanded them, because she stayed. Because everyone else had already walked away. Far above the stable, the Alpha King stood alone upon the highest balcony of his fortress. The cold wind pulled against his heavy cloak. Below him stretched the kingdom he had spent his entire life protecting. He should have felt pride. Instead, he felt something else. Failure. His eyes drifted toward the distant stable. He remembered every wolf resting inside. He remembered riding beside them through burning forests. He remembered hearing their fearless howls before every battle. Now he could do nothing except watch them disappear one after another. The royal healers had exhausted every remedy. The kingdom's greatest scholars found no answers. Every report ended the same way. Another wolf lost. Another loyal companion gone forever. The Alpha King closed his eyes. This was the first battle his strength could not win. Behind him, footsteps approached carefully. A trusted advisor bowed with practiced respect. "Your Majesty, the council requests another meeting after sunrise." The Alpha King answered without turning. "Another meeting will not heal dying wolves." The advisor lowered his head. "The council believes resources should no longer be wasted." Silence covered the balcony. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He dismissed the advisor with one quiet gesture. When the footsteps faded, his eyes returned to the forgotten stable. Something inside him refused to surrender. He simply did not know what hope still remained. Morning finally arrived. Golden light slowly spread across fresh snow. Servants opened palace gates. Guards changed positions. Life returned to the fortress. Near the abandoned stable, several workers stopped walking. They stared in confusion. Fresh paw prints covered the snow. Not leading inside, leading out. Impossible. The wolves had been too weak to stand. Yet tracks stretched away from the stable toward the nearby forest. Whispers spread through the fortress before breakfast. Some claimed spirits had carried the wolves away. Others believed wild animals had entered during the night. No explanation made sense. From a nearby tower, the Alpha King quietly noticed something else. Beside the wolf tracks appeared another trail. Small human footprints. The same footprints that had appeared before every sunrise during the past several mornings. Someone had been entering the cursed stable. Someone the guards had never reported. Someone who clearly wanted to remain unseen. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. For the first time in many weeks, curiosity replaced despair. Who would risk entering a place everyone feared? Why had no one spoken of these footprints? And why were wolves that could barely breathe suddenly walking through fresh snow? Without speaking a single word, the Alpha King descended from the tower. He wrapped his cloak tightly around his shoulders. Ignoring the confused guards, he stepped into the untouched snow. His boots settled inside the mysterious trail. Each footprint pulled him closer toward the forgotten stable. Closer toward a secret hidden inside his own kingdom. Closer toward a truth that would change everything he believed about loyalty, power, and the people surrounding his throne forever. The Alpha King moved through the untouched snow without calling a single guard to follow him. Every step felt heavier than the last. The morning air was sharp enough to sting his lungs, yet he barely noticed the cold. His eyes remained fixed on the narrow trail ahead. The wolf tracks crossed the courtyard with surprising strength. Beside them, the smaller footprints remained steady. Whoever had walked here had never rushed. Whoever had entered the forgotten stable had done so with complete confidence. The great ruler who had commanded thousands of warriors now found himself chasing a mystery inside his own fortress. That truth disturbed him more than any enemy army ever had. He knew every captain, every servant,
Every noble family.
yet someone had entered the most forbidden place in the kingdom again and again without anyone reporting it. The stable slowly appeared through the morning mist. Its broken roof carried thick layers of snow. Old wooden beams bent beneath the weight of winter. The place looked abandoned from the outside.
Silent.
Lifeless. Then something impossible reached his ears. A low, peaceful howl. Not a cry of pain. Not the desperate sound of a dying beast. A howl filled with calm. The Alpha King stopped. His heartbeat slowed. For weeks he had heard only suffering from inside these walls. Today there was hope. He pushed the old wooden door open without making a sound. Cold air drifted across the floor. Golden rays of morning sunlight slipped through the broken roof and filled the stable with soft light. For a long moment he simply stood there. His eyes struggled to believe what they were seeing. The oldest wolf lay peacefully across fresh straw instead of filthy, rotting hay. Its breathing had become deep and steady. A younger white wolf that had not been able to stand 3 days earlier now rested on all 4 legs. Another slowly drank water from a wooden bowl while gently wagging its tail. Nothing inside the stable looked like the place he remembered. Everything felt alive. Then his eyes found her. She knelt beside a young gray wolf whose injured shoulder had been carefully wrapped with clean cloth. Her clothes were simple and worn. Her hands carried countless tiny cuts from winter branches and frozen stone. Strands of dark hair escaped beneath her hood while snow melted quietly across her shoulders. She never noticed the king. Her entire attention remained fixed upon the wolf before her. She slowly removed the old bandage. The wound beneath looked cleaner than before. She gently washed it with warm water mixed with crushed herbs. The wolf never resisted. It trusted every movement she made. The Alpha King watched without speaking. Royal healers had needed chains and iron cages whenever they approached these same wolves. This woman touched them with bare hands. No fear. No hesitation. Only kindness. She finished treating the wound, then smiled softly. "You are stronger today," she whispered. "Tomorrow you will walk farther." The wolf slowly licked her injured hand. The Alpha King felt something tighten inside his chest. He had seen warriors cry after losing battles. He had watched soldiers give their lives without regret. Yet this simple moment held more strength than any battlefield. She finally sensed another presence behind her.
Slowly she turned.
Her eyes met the Alpha King's. Shock filled her face. She immediately lowered her head. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I never wished to trespass." The Alpha King studied her quietly. His voice remained calm.
Who are you?
She hesitated. "My name is Alara. I gather herbs from the northern forest. I help wherever I can." The king looked around the stable. "You call this helping?" She slowly nodded. "No one else came. Someone had to." Her answer carried no anger, no accusation, only truth. The Alpha King walked deeper into the stable. Every wolf watched him. Yet something had changed. Instead of fear filling the room, the wolves remained calm, almost peaceful. He stopped beside the oldest white wolf. This beast had fought beside him during 3 great wars. Months ago, it had nearly stopped eating. Now it slowly lifted its head and looked directly into his eyes. There was life inside those silver eyes, once more. The Alpha King gently rested one hand upon the wolf's neck. Its fur felt warmer than it had in many weeks. He turned back toward Alara. "The royal physicians failed. The greatest healers in my kingdom failed. Why are the wolves recovering beside you?" She lowered her eyes. "Because they stopped believing they mattered." The king remained silent. She continued speaking softly. "Medicine heals wounds. Hope heals the heart. They were abandoned. They were lonely. Every living creature knows when it has been forgotten." No scholar had ever spoken those words inside his court. No physician had offered such an answer. Yet standing before living proof, he could not dismiss her. The Alpha King slowly walked through the stable. He noticed bowls of fresh water placed carefully beside every resting place. Bundles of herbs hung from old beams. Fresh straw covered the floor. Broken windows had been sealed with cloth to block the freezing wind. She had transformed ruin into shelter, using almost nothing. "How long have you been coming here?" "Every night."
Why?
"Because they waited for someone. No one should die believing the world stopped caring." Those words echoed through the king's heart long after she finished speaking. Far away inside the palace, another meeting had already begun. The royal council gathered around a long stone table. Their faces remained serious. One advisor quietly entered the chamber carrying disturbing news. "Your Majesty cannot be found." Another noble frowned. "Where has he gone?" The advisor answered carefully. "Toward the abandoned stable." Silence settled across the room. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances. One older noble slowly clenched his hands beneath the table. "That stable should already be empty." Another quickly replied. "Perhaps he only wishes to see the wolves one final time." The older noble forced a smile. Perhaps. Yet deep inside his thoughts, fear quietly awakened. Back inside the stable, the Alpha King watched as one young wolf slowly rose to its feet. Its movements remained weak. Its legs trembled beneath its weight.
Even so, it stayed standing.
The king could hardly believe his eyes. Yesterday, this same wolf had been unable to lift its head. Today it took one slow step, then another. Alara smiled with quiet pride. "Very good. Keep going." The wolf walked across the stable before gently resting again. The Alpha King whispered almost to himself. "Impossible." She looked toward him. "Not impossible. Patient." Silence returned. Outside, snowflakes drifted gently from the gray sky. Inside, hope quietly filled every empty corner. For the first time in months, the Alpha King believed his wolves might survive. Yet one question continued growing inside his mind. If one woman with almost nothing could save his wolves, then why had every royal healer failed? His thoughts became darker. Failure no longer seemed like the only answer. Perhaps someone wanted the wolves to die. The possibility struck him like cold steel. His eyes slowly lifted toward the palace, visible through the broken stable window. Someone inside those walls knew more than they admitted. Someone had hidden the truth. Someone had allowed loyal wolves to suffer. His years as a ruler awakened instantly. Instinct replaced emotion. This was no longer only about healing. This had become a hunt. Without another word, he turned toward the stable door. Alara looked at him with quiet uncertainty. Will they be safe? The Alpha King looked back at the wolves, then at the woman who had refused to abandon them. From this day forward, no one will touch this place without my command. She quietly bowed her head. The king stepped back into the falling snow. His expression had completely changed. He had entered the stable searching for an unknown visitor. He left carrying the first thread of a hidden conspiracy. Behind him, the wolves remained alive. Ahead of him waited a palace filled with smiling faces. For the first time, the Alpha King no longer trusted those smiles. And somewhere behind those stone walls, someone had just learned that the wolves were no longer dying. The Alpha King returned to the palace without looking back once. Snow continued falling behind him until the stable slowly disappeared beneath the white horizon. Yet his thoughts never left that place. Every answer he had searched for inside royal chambers had been waiting inside a broken building everyone else had abandoned. A woman with nothing had achieved what his greatest healers could not. His wolves were recovering. That truth changed everything. The palace gates opened before him. Guards bowed with perfect discipline. Servants stepped aside without raising their eyes. Everything looked exactly as it always had. Every stone stood in its place. Every banner moved proudly above the towers. Every corridor echoed with respectful silence. Yet nothing felt the same. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King no longer saw loyalty everywhere he looked. He saw questions. He saw hidden faces behind practiced smiles. He saw fear hiding beneath perfect manners. He entered the council hall without announcing his arrival. The nobles immediately stood from their seats. Every face showed respect. Every voice greeted their ruler. Yet one thing caught the king's attention. Not one council member asked about the wolves. Not one. The Alpha King slowly walked toward the great stone table. His eyes rested upon every advisor one by one. The silence became heavier with every passing heartbeat. Finally, he spoke. The wolves are improving. Several nobles looked surprised. Others forced smiles. One elderly advisor bowed slightly. That is wonderful news, Your Majesty. The Alpha King never looked away from him.
Is it?
The old man hesitated. Of course. The kingdom depends upon your sacred pack. The king continued watching him. Then why did every physician tell me they could not be saved? No one answered. Another advisor finally stepped forward. Perhaps the sickness weakened naturally. Winter diseases often disappear without warning. The Alpha King said nothing. Inside his mind, Alara's words returned once again. They stopped believing they mattered. Medicine heals wounds. Hope heals the heart. His eyes slowly narrowed. Someone inside this room was lying. He simply did not know who. The meeting ended sooner than anyone expected. No decisions were made. No celebrations were held. The Alpha King dismissed everyone with a single motion of his hand. As the nobles quietly left the chamber, several exchanged nervous glances. Their ruler had changed. They could feel it. The king no longer accepted easy answers. Far below the palace, Alara continued caring for the recovering wolves. The stable looked brighter with every passing day. Fresh straw covered the floor. Warm water stood beside every resting place. Several wolves had already begun walking around the stable without assistance. The oldest white wolf even stepped outside beneath the winter sky. Its movements remained slow. Its body still carried weakness. Yet its eyes burned with life once more. Alara smiled quietly. You still remember how to fight. The wolf gently rubbed its head against her shoulder. For the first time since arriving at the stable, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe they truly would survive. Suddenly, the old wolf stopped moving. Its ears lifted. Its body became completely alert. One after another, every wolf inside the stable reacted the same way. Not with fear. With attention. Someone approached. Heavy footsteps crossed the frozen ground. The stable door slowly opened. The Alpha King entered once again. This time, he carried no guards. No royal physicians. Only himself. Alara bowed respectfully. Your Majesty. The king looked around the stable. Another wolf was standing today. Yesterday, there were 3. Today there are 6. She nodded. They are remembering how to live. The king slowly approached the oldest wolf. It walked toward him without hesitation. Something impossible happened. The wolf lowered its head beneath the king's hand exactly as it had done years ago before every battle. The Alpha King closed his eyes for one brief moment. Emotion rose inside him like a silent storm. He had believed this companion was already lost. Now hope stood before him. He turned toward Alara. "What herbs do you use?" She carried a small bundle toward him. Simple mountain leaves, tree bark, wild roots. Nothing rare, nothing expensive. The king examined them carefully. "These grow everywhere." She nodded.
Yes.
"Then why did none of my physicians use them?" Alara remained silent. The question disturbed her. Finally she answered carefully. "Perhaps they forgot the forest. Perhaps they trusted books more than life." The king understood her meaning. Knowledge, without compassion, had become useless. He quietly handed the herbs back. "Tomorrow royal healers will come here. Not to command, to learn." Alara looked uncertain. "Will they listen?" The king answered without hesitation. "They will." That evening palace servants carried fresh food toward the stable for the very first time in months. Clean blankets followed. Medicine followed. Warm firewood followed. The forgotten place slowly became alive again. Yet not everyone welcomed these changes. Deep beneath the western tower, another secret meeting had begun. Only 4 men gathered inside the dark chamber. Their faces remained hidden beneath shadows. One spoke first. "The king visits the stable every day." Another answered with quiet anger. "He was never supposed to find that woman." A third slowly placed both hands upon the table. "If the wolves recover, everything changes." The oldest noble finally spoke. "Then she cannot remain alive." Silence covered the room. No one questioned his words. Far above them, the Alpha King stood inside the royal library. Ancient books surrounded him from every wall. Dust-covered forgotten scrolls written by rulers long before his birth. He searched through records describing the royal wolves. Old battles. Old healers. Old traditions. Hours passed. Finally, he discovered something unusual. A faded journal written by a healer almost 200 years earlier. The old pages described wolves refusing food after losing trusted companions. The sickness had not begun inside the body. It had begun inside the spirit. The treatment shocked him. Warm shelter, gentle care, constant presence. Natural herbs gathered from mountain forests. Everything matched what Alara had already been doing. The Alpha King slowly closed the ancient book. His royal physicians had overlooked knowledge already belonging to the kingdom. Or perhaps someone had hidden it. His suspicion deepened. The following morning, the first group of healers arrived at the stable. Their expressions carried doubt. Some looked offended. Others appeared embarrassed. Alara greeted them quietly. She showed them every herb, every bandage, every feeding routine. Some listened carefully. Others remained skeptical. Then something happened that silenced everyone. One young wolf slowly walked toward the physicians. Instead of retreating, it calmly allowed one healer to touch its injured shoulder. The physicians stared in disbelief. "Its fever is gone." Another healer carefully examined its eyes. "Its strength has returned." One by one they realized the impossible truth. The wolves were healing, not because of expensive medicine, because someone had never abandoned them. News spread through the fortress before sunset. Servants whispered while carrying water. Soldiers smiled for the first time in weeks. Kitchen workers secretly saved extra food for the stable. Hope moved across the kingdom like the first light after endless winter. Yet hidden inside that hope, danger quietly awakened. Late that night, Alara finished caring for the wolves. Most had already fallen asleep. She stepped outside carrying an empty wooden bucket. Snow covered the ground with perfect silence. The moon hung low above the forest. Everything looked peaceful. Then the oldest white wolf suddenly rushed outside. Its growl shattered the silence. Alara turned quickly. The wolf stood between her and the darkness beyond the trees. Its thick fur rose. Its silver eyes locked upon something hidden beyond the snow. Another wolf appeared beside it. Then another. Within seconds, every recovering wolf had formed a living wall around Alara. She could see nothing. Only darkness. Only trees. Only falling snow. Then for one brief moment, she noticed movement. A shadow. Watching. Waiting. The figure disappeared before she could cry out. The wolves continued growling long after the stranger vanished into the forest. Inside the palace, at that exact moment, the Alpha King suddenly opened his eyes from restless sleep. His instincts screamed that something had changed. Someone was no longer hunting his wolves. Someone had begun hunting the woman who saved them. And before another sunrise arrived, the invisible enemy, hiding inside his own kingdom, would make its first move. The night refused to sleep. A heavy silence covered the fortress, while snow continued falling across the mountains. The frozen wind carried strange whispers through the ancient trees surrounding the abandoned stable. Inside the shelter, the wolves rested together in peaceful warmth. Their breathing had become stronger with every passing day. The room that once echoed with suffering now carried the quiet rhythm of returning life. Yet outside, another heartbeat had awakened. One filled with fear. One driven by desperation. The men hiding inside the palace understood something that no one else had noticed. Every wolf that recovered became another living witness. Every day Alara remained alive, the Alpha King moved one step closer to discovering the truth they had buried beneath years of lies. Their time was running out. Before the first light of dawn, 4 shadowed riders slipped through the western gate without royal permission. Dark cloaks hid their faces. Their horses carried no banners. Even their weapons were wrapped in cloth to silence every sound. They were not leaving for war. They were leaving to erase a secret. Inside the stable, the oldest white wolf suddenly opened its eyes. Its ears stood tall. Its nose lifted toward the freezing air. A deep growl rolled through its chest. Every other wolf immediately reacted. One after another they rose from the straw. No panic. Only perfect instinct. Alara woke at once. She had learned to trust the wolves more than her own eyes. "Something is wrong," she whispered. The wolves slowly gathered near the stable entrance. Their bodies formed a living shield around her. Outside, the moon disappeared behind thick clouds. Darkness swallowed everything. Then came the sound. Slow footsteps crushing fresh snow. Not one person. Several. Moving carefully. Trying not to be heard. The stable door remained closed. No one spoke. Only the wind answered. Suddenly, an arrow pierced the wooden wall and buried itself deep inside a support beam. Another followed. Then another. The attack had begun. The wolves exploded into furious howls that shook the frozen valley. Alara grabbed a burning lantern and quickly pulled every frightened wolf farther away from the entrance. Heavy boots slammed against the wooden door.
Once. Twice.
3 times. The old wood cracked beneath the force. Outside, one shadow spoke with cold certainty. "Leave no witnesses." The final strike shattered the door. 4 armed figures rushed inside, expecting frightened animals and a helpless woman. Instead, they found a wall of wolves. The oldest white wolf charged first. Its powerful body crashed into the nearest attacker before the man could raise his blade. Another wolf knocked a second rider across the frozen floor. The stable filled with furious growls and flying straw. Alara stood frozen for one heartbeat. Then survival took control. She grabbed a long wooden shovel leaning against the wall. One attacker rushed toward her. She swung with every ounce of strength she possessed. The heavy wood struck his arm. His sword slipped from frozen fingers. He stumbled backward. Outside, another howl echoed across the mountains. Louder.
Deeper.
More powerful than the rest. The Alpha King. Earlier that night, he had awakened with a feeling he could not explain. Years of battle had taught him to trust instinct above reason. Without waiting for guards, he mounted his black horse and rode toward the stable through the storm. Now he had arrived. The moment he heard the wolves howling together, his heart turned cold. He leaped from the saddle before the horse fully stopped. The shattered stable door stood open. Snow covered the ground with fresh footprints. The Alpha King drew his sword, then entered. Everything happened in seconds. One attacker rushed toward him. The king's blade flashed through the air. The weapon flew from the man's hand before he even understood what had happened. A second attacker tried escaping through the broken doorway. The oldest white wolf intercepted him with terrifying
speed.
The man collapsed into the snow, unable to move. The remaining two figures fled into the forest. The Alpha King never chased them. His eyes searched only for one person. Alara stood beside the frightened wolves. Her breathing remained uneven. A cut across her forearm slowly stained her sleeve red. The king immediately crossed the stable. "Are you hurt?" "Only a little," she answered quietly. The Alpha King looked around the damaged shelter. Broken wood covered the floor. Lantern light flickered across frightened faces. The wolves surrounded Alara instead of running away, protecting her. He finally understood. These wolves no longer obeyed instinct alone. They had chosen her. The king's voice became calm. "No one enters this place again. Not while I breathe." At sunrise, every soldier inside the fortress received new orders. The abandoned stable was no longer abandoned. Royal guards surrounded it from every direction. Archers watched from nearby towers. No visitor entered without the king's command. The sudden change shocked the entire palace. Rumors spread faster than winter winds. Some believed assassins from another kingdom had attacked. Others whispered that ancient spirits guarded the wolves. No one knew the truth, except the guilty. Deep beneath the eastern tower, the council gathered once more. This meeting carried no confidence, only fear. One advisor slammed his fist against the stone table. They failed. Another looked toward the closed door. The king survived every battlefield. Did anyone truly believe hired blades could stop him? Silence answered. The oldest noble slowly stood. His face carried no emotion. The woman has become more dangerous than the wolves themselves. Every day she breathes, our secrets become weaker. A younger council member finally asked the question everyone feared. What if the king begins searching the records? The old noble slowly smiled. Then we give him another enemy. Someone else to blame. The plan had changed. Their deception had entered a darker stage. Meanwhile, the Alpha King remained inside the royal archives from sunrise until darkness returned. Ancient scroll after ancient scroll covered the long wooden table. Old reports, battle journals, healing records, supply lists. Every forgotten page became another piece of a puzzle. Hours later, something unusual caught his attention. Several reports concerning medicine delivered to the wolves had disappeared completely. Entire years had been removed from the archives. Not damaged, not misplaced, removed. Someone had carefully erased them. The king's expression hardened. Records do not vanish by accident. Truth disappears only when someone fears it. He quietly rolled the final scroll closed. His suspicion had become certainty. The sickness had never been an accident. Someone inside his own kingdom had planned it. That evening, he walked toward the stable once more. The guards immediately stepped aside. Inside, he found Alara replacing damaged boards where the attackers had broken through. The wolves worked around her like loyal companions. One carried small branches in its mouth. Another quietly watched the entrance. Life continued despite violence. The Alpha King admired her strength. Most people would have fled after such an attack. She stayed. He slowly approached. "Why did you not leave?" She looked toward the wolves. "Because they cannot leave." The king answered softly. "You nearly died." She smiled gently. "Then I nearly died, doing something worth living for." Those words struck deeper than any sword. The Alpha King had spent years winning kingdoms. Yet this woman possessed a courage no throne could create. He finally understood why the wolves trusted her. Strength was never loud. Sometimes strength simply refused to abandon those who needed it. Outside, snow began falling again. The oldest white wolf suddenly lifted its head. Its sharp eyes focused beyond the forest. The Alpha King noticed immediately. "What is it?" The wolf released one low growl. Not angry. Warning. The king stepped outside. Far beyond the trees, a single raven circled above the mountains before disappearing toward the palace. His eyes followed its flight. Someone inside those walls had just received news that the attack had failed. Someone would now prepare a far more dangerous move. The Alpha King slowly rested one hand upon the hilt of his sword. The battle was no longer hidden. It had finally begun. But the enemy still remained unseen. And somewhere inside the palace, the true mastermind smiled behind a mask of perfect loyalty while preparing the betrayal that could either destroy the throne forever or reveal every dark secret buried beneath the Alpha King's empire. The first light of dawn arrived beneath a sky heavy with snow. The kingdom looked peaceful from a distance. White fields stretched beyond the fortress walls. Smoke rose from village chimneys. The frozen river shimmered beneath pale sunlight. Everything appeared calm. Everything appeared safe. Yet beneath the surface, a storm waited to break. The Alpha King stood alone on the highest tower of his fortress. His eyes scanned the kingdom he had spent his life protecting. For years he had believed enemies lived beyond his borders. For years he had ridden into battle against rival kings and invading armies. Now he understood a painful truth. The most dangerous enemy had been sitting beside his throne all along. Behind him, footsteps approached. One of his most trusted captains bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, the council has gathered." The Alpha King slowly turned.
Good.
"Today we end this." The captain followed him through endless corridors of stone. Word had already spread through the palace. Something important was coming. Servants whispered. Guards stood straighter than usual. Even the nobles moved carefully. Fear traveled through the fortress like a shadow. Inside the great council chamber, dozens of influential figures filled the room. Military commanders, royal advisors, wealthy nobles. Every face remained serious. The old noble who had secretly guided the conspiracy sat quietly at the far end of the table. His expression remained calm, confident,
certain.
He still believed he controlled the game. The massive doors opened. The Alpha King entered. Silence immediately swallowed the room. No one spoke. No one moved. The king slowly walked toward the center of the chamber. His gaze traveled across every face. The room felt colder with every passing second. Then he spoke. "Months ago, my wolves began dying." His voice echoed through the hall. The council remained silent. The royal healers failed. The records disappeared. Witnesses were attacked. Someone inside this kingdom betrayed not only me. They betrayed the very creatures who built this empire beside us. Uneasy glances appeared around the room. Several nobles shifted nervously. The old advisor remained motionless. The Alpha King continued. "Last night my guards arrested one of the men who attacked the stable." Shock flashed across multiple faces. The king watched carefully. Fear always revealed itself. Sooner or later, the prisoner confessed. A heavy silence followed. The old advisor's jaw tightened for the first time. The king took another step forward. He gave names. He gave payments. He gave orders. "Every road leads back to this room." Several nobles immediately stood. Voices erupted. Denials filled the chamber. Confusion spread like wildfire. Then the Alpha King raised one hand. The room instantly fell silent. The doors opened again. Royal guards entered carrying ancient records recovered from hidden chambers beneath the eastern tower. Bundles of forgotten scrolls covered their arms. The king looked toward the council. The missing documents were found. The room froze. Several faces turned pale. The king continued. "Years ago, these records described proper care for aging wolves. Those instructions were deliberately removed. The sickness spread because knowledge was hidden. The healers failed because truth was stolen. And every order traces back to one man." Slowly, the Alpha King turned toward the oldest noble. The room followed his gaze. The old advisor remained seated. His confidence finally cracked. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the king spoke the words that shattered everything.
"Stand."
The old man slowly rose. His eyes searched the room. No allies moved. No supporters spoke. No one came to his defense. Years of manipulation collapsed around him. The Alpha King's voice remained calm. "You poisoned loyalty. You buried truth. You ordered attacks against innocent lives. You weakened this kingdom for your own ambition." The old noble laughed softly. A desperate laugh. A broken laugh. Then he finally revealed his hatred. "I built this kingdom as much as you did. The throne should have belonged to stronger hands. The Alpha King's eyes hardened. Stronger hands do not hide behind lies. The old noble suddenly reached for a concealed blade. Guards moved instantly. Steel flashed. The weapon clattered across stone. Within seconds he stood surrounded.
Defeated.
Finished. The conspiracy had ended. Yet the Alpha King felt no satisfaction. Only clarity. Because this victory had never been about punishment. It had been about truth. Hours later the kingdom gathered inside the central courtyard. Snow continued falling gently from the sky. Thousands of citizens filled the open space. Word of the conspiracy had spread everywhere. People wanted answers. People wanted hope. The Alpha King stepped onto the great platform overlooking the crowd. Beside him stood Alara. Simple clothing. Worn boots. The same woman who had entered the forgotten stable night after night when no one cared. Many people stared at her with surprise. Others with admiration. The king looked across the sea of faces. Then toward the wolves. The entire royal pack stood proudly nearby. Strong.
Healthy. Alive.
The oldest white wolf stood at the front. Its silver eyes reflected the winter sunlight. Weeks earlier it had been waiting to die. Now it looked ready to run through mountains again. The sight filled the crowd with emotion. The Alpha King finally spoke. This kingdom survived because someone remembered what the rest of us forgot. His gaze moved toward Alara. Power without compassion becomes weakness. Strength without loyalty becomes emptiness. While nobles argued, while advisors schemed, while healers surrendered, one woman chose not to walk away. The crowd remained completely silent. Every word reached them. Every truth settled deeply. The Alpha King continued. She saved the wolves. She saved knowledge. She saved a part of this kingdom that all of us nearly abandoned. The people erupted. Cheers rolled through the courtyard like thunder. Not for the king.
For Alara.
Tears filled her eyes. She lowered her head. She had never sought recognition. She had never asked for reward. Yet now an entire kingdom honored her courage. The Alpha King raised his hand again. Silence returned. From this day forward, no creature that serves this kingdom will ever be abandoned. The old stable will become a sanctuary. The healers will learn what was forgotten. And loyalty will matter more than titles. The crowd roared once more. A new chapter had begun. That evening the snow finally stopped. For the first time in many months the sky cleared. Stars appeared above the fortress.
Bright.
Endless. Peaceful. Alara walked slowly toward the stable. The place looked completely different now. Fresh timber repaired the walls. Warm lanterns glowed beside the entrance. Clean straw filled every corner. Life had returned. The wolves greeted her immediately.
Tails wagged.
Soft growls echoed through the shelter. The oldest white wolf approached first. It gently rested its head against her shoulder. Alara smiled. We made it. Outside another figure approached. The Alpha King. No crown rested upon his head tonight. No guards followed behind him. Only a man who finally understood something important. He stopped beside her. The wolves welcomed him too. Not as a ruler. As family. For several moments, neither spoke. They simply watched the wolves resting peacefully around them. The Alpha King finally broke the silence. You changed this kingdom. Alara looked toward the sleeping pack. They changed it too. The king smiled faintly. Perhaps that is true. The wind moved softly through the trees. Far above them stars filled the sky. The darkness that had haunted the kingdom for months was gone. The conspiracy had fallen. The wolves had survived. Truth had returned. Yet something even greater had happened. The Alpha King himself had changed. He no longer ruled through fear. He no longer stood alone above everyone else. He finally understood what true strength looked like. It looked like loyalty. It looked like sacrifice. It looked like staying beside the forgotten when everyone else walked away. Days later the kingdom witnessed something it would never forget. The Alpha King rode through the capital surrounded by his restored wolf pack. People lined every street. Children cheered. Families smiled. Hope filled the air. At the front of the procession ran the oldest white wolf. Strong once more. Proud once more. alive once more. The kingdom saw more than a ruler that day. They saw a leader reborn. The empire that emerged from winter was stronger than the one that entered it. Not because its armies had grown, not because its walls had become taller, because its heart had returned. And as the Alpha King looked across the horizon, he knew something with absolute certainty. No enemy beyond the mountains could ever destroy what loyalty had rebuilt. The wolves howled together beneath the endless sky. The sound rolled across forests and valleys, across rivers and mountains, across the entire kingdom, a final reminder that compassion had saved what power alone never could. And beneath those stars, the Alpha King stood at the beginning of a new reign, not feared above all others, respected by them, a ruler stronger than before, a kingdom united, a pack restored, and a future that finally belonged